Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Happy summer solstice, happy Pride Day, and happy Father's Day to everyone today. I'm the Reverend Lydia Ferrante Roseberry. I'm the minister of this beloved congregation, and I'm joined today by Service Associate Paul Gibb, with Tad Koryath and Emily Jaworski providing music and leading hymns, and our invaluable tech ushers, Bill Beachley, Deborah Mensch, and Don Price. They help everything run so smoothly behind the scenes. And of course, most important is all of you, because you are the fellowship, and regardless of where and how we are meeting. So as I say the welcome words today, I invite you to shift into gallery view if you haven't already done so, and scroll through the screens so you can experience the lovely diversity of this congregation. Because without it and without you, there would be no us. You are welcome here today. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, skin tones, shapes, and sizes that come together in your uniqueness, you are welcome here. In all the ways that you experience and express gender, you are welcome here. In the beauty that is who you love and how you love, you are welcome here. In all the ways that you make your living and in all the places you are from, you are welcome here. Christian, pagan, humanist, Jew, Buddhist, mystic, Muslim, Unitarian, Universalist, with all the traditions that inform your spiritual life, you are welcome here today. No matter how long you've been away, nor how soon until you return, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart today or tears, you are welcome here. You are invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you here today. I have a few announcements this morning. You might be surprised to know that the fellowship isn't currently in line with what the Unitarian Universalist Association requires of a welcoming congregation. Now, for Unitarian Universalists, welcoming congregation is the program that specifically regards our words and actions around GLBTQIA people. So that might be surprising to you that we're not in compliance, or maybe it makes you curious or concerned or even hopeful that we can do better. After the service today, there is a stakeholders meeting on the subject. It will be Clara Kelly is the one who is leading this, and we'd like to hear from lots of people about ways we could make our fellowship more welcoming, as well as share about the guidelines that the UUA has set up for us. Deborah's going to add the link into the chat right now, so if you want to join in that conversation, please do that after the service. Also after the service today, children and youth of all ages are invited to the School of the Spirit coffee hour for kids and families. That link is also going into the chat right now. The UUA General Assembly starts this Wednesday, and since it is all virtual, you can still register for the bargain price of $150 for the whole thing. GA is full of incredible speakers and workshops, and most of all, the energy of and inspiration of thousands who share our liberal religious values joining together. I've already done some activities for the UU Ministry Days, and I will tell you, even though it's virtual, I can still feel that connection across the nation. As you can imagine, much of this year's focus will be relevant to our times, as it always is, as we address, cope with, and own systemic racism in our culture and institutions. I put a link in the registration into the chat and hope many of you will join me this year in this unique virtual opportunity. Please do feel free to contact me or Scott Yeomans or Wendy Highsmith, who are our denominational affairs team. They can provide you more information, including scholarships, if that is important for you. I will be at General Assembly all week, so I'll be unavailable for meetings and not on email much. If you do have a pastoral concern or time-sensitive need, please don't hesitate to text me. And following next Sunday's service, we'll be showing the General Assembly worship service. That starts at 11 a.m., so please plan to come to the 10 a.m. service by Pete Warnick and Eric Williams and stay on for the General Assembly service. It's always a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. If you're new here, we're glad you found us and hope that even in this virtual community, you can experience the warmth and love of this congregation. Each Sunday is different here, so please come back a few times to really get to know us. If you want to get better connected, please see the chat window for a link to our first-time visitors page. On this page, you can find a link to our visitor information form, which you can use to tell us about you and request information about fellowship activities. Or you can mail your information to our office manager, Carol. Her email is in the chat window as well. Be sure to check out the fellowship calendar and Connections Weekly for all the opportunities we have to stay connected. We may be physically distanced, but we are still socially connected. And finally, if anyone is new today and would like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do. We'd love to know who is among us. All are invited to stay for virtual coffee hour after the service, either here or at the Children and Youth Coffee Hour that's in the chat, or to go to the Welcoming Congregation chat. And now if you have a chalice at home, you can light it with me as our fellowship chalice. So we know where all our chalices are. Please write in the chat, chalice lit in, and then the name of your town. Please say the words along with me as I light our chalice. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. And now I will sing our bowl again and invite you to draw deeper into this present moment and the company of this beloved community.
Our opening words today are from UU Minister Jessica Starr Rockers. Every Sunday morning when I was growing up, my father would take us to Mass at St. Peter's Catholic Church. I loved the hymns and the smells and bells, as they say, but the sermons were kind of a bore. So I would occupy myself by counting the cuts and scrapes and bruises on my father's hands. My dad was an electrician and a farmer, working with his hands from before the sun came up until long after it went down. So every week I would take his large hands in my little ones, turning them over, examining, discovering new bruises, and keeping track of the healing of the old ones. I would count the wounds, and whisper the tally in his ear. I love that he let me hold and investigate his hands in this way. Snuggled up next to him in the pew, in the quiet of the church, with just the priest's voice in the background. Having two jobs that demanded his attention, my dad didn't always have time for such intimacies, except on Sunday morning. And I took pride in those wounds. It was evidence of how hard my dad worked to take care of his family. He was a man who was often uncomfortable with expressing affection. But I could see in those hands how much he loved me. Was my dad a good dad? Was he there for me when I needed him? Did he protect me and provide for me? Did he care about me? When I ask myself these questions, I think of his hands. We dedicate this service to the hands of our fathers for all the ways they cared and all the hard work that they did to show us we are loved. The following words are from The Toughest Indian in the World by Sherman Alexie. Quote, I thought about my father's opportunities and his failures, about the man he should have been and the man he had become. End of quote. When I think about the fathers I've known, especially the ones born before the 1950s, I wonder how many of them really were the men they should have been. I wonder just how privileged they really were and just how much enslaved to our society's expectations. And the more I think about the fathers I've known, and also the father stories I've heard from friends, it seems to me that more and more of them were not the men they should have been or the men they wanted to be, but rather were the men they had become, the men that our culture and our history had made them. My father was extremely gifted musically and grew up wanting to become a concert pianist. But during World War II, he had to work in a facility that processed uranium and plutonium. And then, after the war, in order to support himself and his family, spent the rest of his working life, dealing with chemicals, even though he suffered from asthma and emphysema. Oh, and his parents would not let him marry the woman he was in love with. He spent many years in a very unhappy with my mother, all the while believing he had only a few more years to live. And all of this probably helped cause him to become an alcoholic, which made it all the more difficult for him to have a close relationship with his children. When I've talked about this with my friends, especially those in my age group, I hear so many more stories of fathers who suffered physical and or emotional damage during World War II or Korea or Vietnam. And to make matters worse, even those who did not fight in wars were told repeatedly that a man's job was to protect and provide for his family. And, of course, to perform discipline, not nurture, for any children. So they worked their tails off at hard jobs only to come home so exhausted that it was very difficult to be loving to their partner and their children. And oh yes, men were virtually never allowed into delivery rooms, places where they might have formed deep bonds with their children right at the moment of their coming into this world. May we recognize that life was likely not very easy for our fathers and grandfathers. May we recognize that we live in an imperfect world. And most of all, may we recognize that no matter how much grief and regret our fathers may have suffered, more than likely there was still deep love hidden somewhere inside them, even if they were not capable of showing it. And even if they had never become the men they should have been, the men they aspired to be, the men we might have wanted them to be. Maybe we take a few minutes to think about our fathers, about the men they should have been and the men they became, and about the love that could very well have been hidden inside of them somewhere. Let us recognize that in spite of whatever male privilege there may be in our society, most of their lives were far from ideal. However difficult or easy it may be for each of us to find compassion in our hearts for our fathers, let us still thank them for what they did provide for us and know that they very likely did so at a cost to their aspirations and their happiness. And now, having grown up ourselves, let us remember that life is imperfect, and we are all imperfect beings living in very imperfect times. Our fathers were no exception.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that beautiful reflection. Each week here in this congregation, we center ourselves in gratitude and generosity. We do so by giving half of our plate away to organizations that share our values. Today we offer half of our plate to the I Have a Dream Foundation of Boulder County. 8 years ago, this congregation made a 10-year, $20,000 commitment to support a group of second and third graders who were then at Escuela Bilingüe Pioneer. Now, some of them have graduated, and some of them are still at Centaurus High School. Our $2,000 per year has provided wraparound services for these kiddos who are most at risk of dropping out of high school based on their socioeconomic class. I Have a Dream Foundation has provided after-school activities, tutoring, counseling, and family support in many other ways so that kids in their program graduate from high school and can pursue their dreams. I Have a Dream Foundation is clear that it does take a village to raise a child. Our class, called the Griffin class, is still receiving support, like SAT prep, college prep, application prep, and tutoring, and even help once they are in those first formative years of college. I Have a Dream Foundation also provides a scholarship for each of those kids that graduates high school and goes on to higher education, whatever that might be. So please do give generously to this program that transforms lives and families. You may also use this time to share answer to this question in the chat. What did the family you grew up in teach you about compassion? And it will be added to the chat as well. Oh my, how I love reading all those little responses in the chat. It really warms my heart to see how it is that the roots of where we find our love and compassion coming from in all its imperfections. For the work of this fellowship, which is bringing love, reason, compassion, and justice into this world right now, and the I Have a Dream Foundation, changing the lives of children, we dedicate our offerings. Thank you so much, congregation, for your generosity.
And now we sing. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
The man who inspired Father's Day was not your typical dad. In fact, he was a Civil War veteran who apparently fought on both sides of the war after he became a prisoner of war on the Confederate side. And then he became a single dad at the end of the 19th century. William Jackson Stewart was his name, and he fathered 14 children total and raised his last 6 children alone after his second wife, Ellen, passed away. Smart had 5 children with his first wife before he became widowed for the first time. In addition, his second wife, Ellen, was also widowed and had 3 children from a previous marriage. And that's how you get to the grand number of 14. Sonora Smart was 16 when her mother, Ellen, passed away, leaving her and her 5 younger brothers to be raised by their father, William Jackson Smart. As I think about young Sonora, losing her dad at a tender age, with 5 younger brothers to boot, I imagine if she too may have rubbed her father's hands, counting the scratches and scars during their Methodist Sunday services. I imagine the challenges and hope that there was also a good portion of tenderness and compassion in that struggling family. And I imagine a man twice widowed whose life was not what he'd expected it to be. In May of 1909, Sonora, who was then 27 years old and married, was attending the first official Mother's Day services in her Methodist church in Spokane, Washington. And throughout the service, she thought about her father, who, quote, was both father and mother to me and my brothers and sisters. And she wondered why fathers didn't have a day to honor their loving service. So in 1910, Sonora brought a petition to the Spokane Ministerial Alliance to recognize the courage and devotion of all fathers like William. She wanted it to be on June 5th, which was her father's birthday. The local Methodist clergy liked the idea of a special Father's Day service, but they couldn't pull something together as quickly as that first Sunday in June, so they settled on the third Sunday in June, which that year was June 19th. On that first Father's Day in 1910, churches across Spokane church services were dedicated to fathers, and they passed out red and white roses in honor of living and deceased fathers. The mayor of Spokane and the governor of Washington issued proclamations on that day as well. Sonora was quite the woman, quite the activist. She was active in the arts and in civic engagement throughout her whole life, but she was particularly dedicated to creating a Father's Day. And she would spend much of the next 60 years pushing for the official recognition of Father's Day as a national holiday, which it finally was by President Richard Nixon in 1972. Sonora was 90 years old at the time. Now, it took that long, those 60 years, in part because there was a concern in Congress that Father's Day would become just another commercialized holiday like Mother's Day. And how we see their foresight and how true that was. In fact, Sonora Smart Dodd gained a lot of support from trade groups that would benefit most from that holiday. For example, manufacturers of ties or tobacco pipes, and those kind of traditional presents one would give to a father. In fact, there was even a Father's Day Council established by the New York Associated Men's Wear Retailers that helped Sonora lobby Congress. So truth be told, the older I get, the more I realize that I'm becoming a little Scrooge-like about these Hallmark holidays, Father's Day and Mother's Day. Although I do remember enjoying them when I was really little and really enjoying them when I was a new parent. They have been co-opted and even created, it seems, by our capitalistic culture. And perhaps especially because of that, they play to gender and racial stereotypes that leave out so many people. We Unitarian Universalists are a people of liberation. Having fought for religious freedom for centuries, our call extends to free ourselves, both individually and collectively, from all that minimizes our potential to bring our fullest selves into the world. And that role of fathering has been squeezed by our society's expectations to relegate manhood to that of a protector or provider, like Paul so beautifully shared. So I admit that I was pleasantly surprised to learn that the man who inspired Father's Day was a single dad, revered by his daughters so much that she dedicated her whole life to creating Father's Day in his honor. And none of the Father's Day celebrations I've ever experienced have acknowledged that. But we are now 20 years into the 21st century, and Father's Day images crafted by capitalistic marketers a century ago that include a man, white, of course, who goes off to the office every day smoking his pipe and wearing his tie, and comes home to provide for his wife, who stays at home and nurtures the children. That role, although it was more popular before, is shrinking, and it's making room for a diversity of families. So let's start with single fathers. In 1990, about 2.4 children were living with single fathers. Today, that number has doubled, and it's about almost doubled. It's about 4.6%. So that was percentages. The National Fatherhood Initiative attributes the rise in single-fathered families to two cultural factors. First of all, men are being seen as more capable parents in general, and accepted as single fathers specifically. And because of that, there's a greater willingness of the courts to award custody to single fathers, and they're essentially awarding custody to the best parent regardless of gender, whereas before it was almost always relegated to mothers. 56% of single fathers are white, compared to about 12% that are Black, 22% that are Hispanic, and less than 10% which are Asian or biracial. And the number of families where parents are single parents part of the time is increasing as well, impacting gender roles. That, of course, has to do with the increase in divorce rates. And I can remember when my brother was recently divorced about 12 or so years ago. I can remember watching how his own parenting became more balanced, as he needed to up his game as a comforter and nurturer for his children when they were only with him. And it was beautiful to watch that transformation, like a bit of an unfolding in that harder layer of protector-provider that he had felt when he was in a married relationship. And in this time now of racial tension, as we're understanding more deeply the racial divides of this country, let us also include a more realistic picture of Black fathers. The stereotype of Black fathers as less involved with their children is unfounded. According to the National Center for Health Statistics, Black fathers living with their children, which is the vast majority of Black fathers, are more likely to have fed or eaten meals with their children, bathed, diapered, or dressed their children, and read to their children daily than are their white counterparts. And the number one reason that Black women raise children without the presence of their children's fathers is because their fathers are missing, either dead at a young age or imprisoned. Almost 1 in 12 Black men between the ages of 25 and 54 is behind bars, compared to 1 in 60 non-Black men. Those are staggering numbers. And it's important for us to recognize and to break out of the stereotypes we have about who raises children, how they raise them, and how well. Now, when we move into the area of same-sex couples, they don't fit the Father's Day mold either. Today, apparently, there are about 114,000 same-sex couples who are raising children in the United States. Now, honestly, I have to say that number seems so small to me. Being a Unitarian Universalist who's lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, I feel like I know about half of those people. I've never forgotten a comment by my friends Laurel and Francie, who are among the first generation of lesbians to birth and adopt their children. They said that one of the freeing things about being in a lesbian relationship was that there were no gender roles to follow. The family patterns, the who sits in the driver's seat, literally and figuratively, were determined by their personalities, not by assigned roles. Finally, there is the binary nature of Father's Day and Mother's Day. Data from 2016 indicates that there are about 700,000 adults identify as transgendered, and among those, about 25% identify as parents. Now, some trans parents celebrate both holidays, some ignore them both. But I have to say, as a liberal religious minister committed to fostering freedom, I am finding these Mother's Day, Father's Day Sundays harder and harder to speak to. In 1994, President Bill Clinton declared a National Parents' Day on the 4th Sunday of July. Maybe we'll try that sometime. Its history is still fraught with the challenges of promoting the traditional family values, but perhaps in these times of breaking out of binary roles, it might be easier to embrace. William Jackson Stewart, a single father in the early 1900s, was not a typical father. But as we lift our gaze, we might recognize that typical, as marketed in the ways that many of us is marketed to us in so many ways, is really a false premise. Blessed are these days when we are exploding our narrow pictures that bind everyone to roles too tightly defined. Blessed are our ancestors and contemporaries, the trendsetters who help us expand our limited vision, who invite us into deeper questions about our own liberation. Blessed are those who parent in motherly roles and fatherly roles, whether or not they have children of their own. And blessed are those who are willing to witness to celebrate, and to nurture all the beautiful ways that love is experienced in the diversity of humanity. May it be our calling as well to celebrate and nurture fatherly roles, motherly roles, and all the ways our children are raised in this world. Blessed be, and amen.
Last
heart pounding down that broken path, with the devil snapping at my heels. I broke through the trees and there in the night, my father's house stood shining hard and bright. The branches and brambles tore my clothes and scratched my arms, but I ran till I fell, shaking in his arms. I awoke and I imagined the hard things that pulled us apart will never again, sir, tear us from each other's hearts. I got dressed into that house. I did right. From out on the road, I could see its windows shining in the light. I walked up the steps and stood on the porch. A woman I didn't recognize came and spoke to me through a chained door. I told her my story and who I'd come for. She said, I'm sorry, son, but no one by that name lives here anymore. My father's house shines hard and bright. It stands like a beacon, calling me in the night, calling and calling, so cold and alone, shining across this dark highway where our sins lie unatoned.
Now I invite us into our time of community connection, our time of sacred sharing that is available to us even in these virtual services. Don will remind us of how to let us know you'd like to share. And when you do, whether it's by voice or by chat, please tell us your name and where you live, and then briefly let us know what's in your heart today. Then I will put a stone into our sacred waters on your behalf. And beloveds, I will put one last stone in today for all of those joys and concerns that remain in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. knowing that even in our silence we are bound together in the web of life. I offer this prayer from Kara Altman Morton. On Father's Day, we honor those people who have been teachers, confidants, and friends. We acknowledge that it is not biology that makes a parent, but love and attention. For those of us who have lost a father or a child, we hold their memories in our hearts. For all of us who are fathers, we ask for continued help in discerning how to best care for our children, whether they are 5 or 50 years old. May the strands of relationship between ourselves and all of creation grow ever stronger. And may all of us, no matter what our place in the cycle of life, experience nurture and love. And may we pass on that love to those we encounter in our paths. So may it be. Amen. And today let us also send our love and prayers to those among us who are thinking about their own fathers, their own brothers, their own husbands, and the way they father. For those of us who have lost loved ones, especially to COVID-19 or anyone during this time when it is so difficult to visit people who are ailing and in the hospital. Let us send our love and compassion to all of those who are experiencing economic insecurity during this time as well, and for those whose mental health issues have spiked because of the national anxiety that we have during these times. Today, let us send our love and prayers to those who fight for the liberation of all people, and especially those who work on the front lines of transforming racial and economic justice. And to all of those who are disenfranchised and struggling for human dignity and the right to live without fear. And let us celebrate today as well everyone in the LGBTQIA community who are showing us a path to liberation that is beautiful and showing us so many ways to be human and to love. Blessed be. Amen.
Sleep, my child, and peace attend you all through the night. I who love you shall be near you all through the night. Soft the drowsy hours are creeping, hill and vale in slumber sleeping. I, my loving vigil keeping all through the night. Mother, I can feel you And while the sun comes stealing, visions of the day revealing, breathes a pure and holy feeling all through the night.
I invite you to extinguish your chalice at home if you have one, and everyone join me in the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Beloveds, go forth on this beautiful, longest day of the year. Go forth and bring love. Go forth and bring justice. Go forth and bring liberation as you celebrate fathers and all people. Blessed be. Amen.